Okay, so that's fantastic. Welcome everyone again, because this recording is started. And yeah, welcome to the Talking Head research seminar series, and especially on our September Talking Head. So I will just try to share my screen again. I had some difficulties before. Let's share. Yeah. So can everyone see the presentation? Yes or no? No, you can't see. Oh.
It's blurry and it's quite big.
Oh, you can see, but you can see it's blurry and big.
Yeah. That's better.
That's better?
Yeah.
What about this one?
Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandra. But before I hand this presentation over to Elaine, Jazz, and I'm also one of the presenter, but I just wanted to mention the our Zoom. This is a Zoom meeting, so you have ability to speak, and I mean, while the presentation is on, but I would also request you to mute yourself, and at the end we will have question and answer sessions, and you can write your questions on chat, and at the end I will look at the chat as well, and pick up any questions if you are very eager to write down your questions and I mean during the session. Okay, so Elaine, I would this presentation I would like to yeah, over to you, if you would like to lead this.
Thanks, Mahua, and welcome everybody. So the presentation should be the four of us today, but actually I think Steve's had some trouble joining us, so I think it may just be Mahua and Jazz and I. So this is about a project that we did with Telford and Wrekin Council and West Mercia Police. The money came from the Home Office, and we worked together to actually get some community consultation going on this, and that's really what we're going to talk about. Really it's about community participation, and it's how we were able to evidence how people felt about changes that were made to their community, and whether they felt these were the right ones or the wrong ones. Could you take me on to the next slide, whoever's got control of the slides? Okay. So this came as part of a Safer Streets initiative. So we'd actually been involved with Telford and Wrekin and West Mercia on an earlier part of work, which was around the Knife Angel, and this one was Safer Streets 3. So it's a Home Office government initiative where they give out funding to improve safety in communities and local authorities, and this is particularly focused on hard goods, so like street lighting and security measures. And so Telford and Wrekin Council successfully won this money with West Mercia Police, and we were asked if we would do a piece of research around Brookside, which is an area in Telford and Wrekin where this project was focused. Can I have the next slide, please? So Brookside was chosen because it had the highest volume of crime recorded in Telford, and the idea was both to reduce crime. It has a number of other issues linked to poverty, linked to insecure housing, and all other sorts of issues. And it's a community in which there is a community support worker, who is Steve Poole, who I think hasn't joined us yet, but I may be wrong, and we work closely with Steve, and Jazz can describe his own role in this. So we work within this community where there was some concerns within the community and some suspicions of people being involved and what was involved, and that actually formed the background to some of the community researcher work we did, and Mahua will talk a little bit more about that. So 12 months after the project, the council and the police were very pleased with some of the outcomes, in that the overall crime had declined by 15%, and in some parts by 50% overall. And there'd been installation of CCTV cameras, street lighting improvements, the installation of an improved youth shelter, so somewhere for young people to hang out that they weren't going to be considered a problem by other people. And then things like target hardening measures, which were about making certain alleyways less accessible if people were trying to commit an offence and then, for example, leave to get somewhere else very quickly. And a neighbourhood watch scheme was established, which again, within this community, was something that took quite a lot of work and intervention. So I'm now going to hand over to you, Jazz, I believe, for slides 3, 4 and 5.
Thank you. Are the slides coming? So just in terms of introduction, my name is Jazz Besher, for those who don't know me, and I am the Service Delivery Manager for Safer Strong Communities in Telford and Wrekin Council. And I was the project lead with the Inspector, Sean Brannan, who was responsible for Safe Neighbourhoods Policing in Brookside at the time. So we put the bid in, and just a background to the bid, it was a Home Office bid, and it's very much on evidence. So unless we had the evidence, that we couldn't apply for the bid. So as Elaine has said, the first thing we had to look at was some of the data and intelligence that we held around local super areas. And again, as Elaine described, those are the areas with the most highest rates of social deprivation. We were successful in that bid, and it was very much around looking at inquisitive crime and how we could improve it. And Brookside at the time had become a no-go area. The number of calls the police get in, the amount of police resources that were going in. Brookside traditionally is a new town, has a transient community, so the community cohesion element was very, very poor. So what we want to do is, as that quote says from Councillor Paul Watney, we wanted to build community resilience and community spirit within Brookside, but look at what the underlying issues were in terms of addressing this to improve assurance and confidence for people to come down and have a look. And this did need extensive support from people like Steve in the community and partners such as Wolverhampton University, the Wrekin Housing Group, private sector landlords. So the first thing we identified as part of this work was to look at actually what are the issues. So part of the bid, it was around acquisitive crime, and that was crime against an individual, burglary against an individual, household burglaries, and also we had a challenge around external influences. So these were gangs coming out from other areas and looking at how they exploit young people on Brookside. Next slide, please, and I'll kind of talking. So the idea was then to have a number of interventions that was going to look at addressing these issues. Somebody, great. So it was really looking at the intervention we're going to put in place. So the first we looked at was saying, when we talk about acquisitive burglary, what acquisitive crime, what is acquisitive crime? Understanding what it was, where it was happening, and what we had to do about it. And what we realised on Brookside was, because the new town has had a number of flats, we had certain properties that were very, very vulnerable. And they were vulnerable because they were private sector properties. As I've already mentioned, there's a transient community that travelled around quite a lot, and landlords were exploiting some of their tenants. So what we did was work with private sector housing to do property inspections of the private sector and understand what was going on in the lives of people living there. We also used target hardening interventions to look at actually how easy is this house to break into, what are the issues, how can we make these houses more safer for people to live in. So that piece of work was happening alongside all the other initiatives. And then in terms of the crime stats, once we understood what was the underlying issues there, we identified by opening up spaces and taking away shrubbery, looking at deploying CCTV and improving street lighting has a massive impact on how people feel about being safe on the estate. And because Brookside is a Radburn design, that means it's one of these houses, it's an estate, it's a European, American design, where you build from the middle like an onion and you build out. So basically you have a centre, and from the centre you build out with the houses facing the centre. So on Brookside, what you get is when you come into a street in Brookside, you don't come to people's front door like you would traditionally, you go to their back gardens. Okay, so the entrance is through the back, and that's where that had been designed. And to do that, obviously, when the estate was built back in the 60s, cars were obviously weren't as popular as they are now. So basically, the idea then was to make sure that there were alleys and paths across that estate where people could travel from one end of the estate to the other end of the estate without having to kind of cut across main roads. However, over time, those became rabbit runs. So basically, people were moving around a estate, and some of the alleyways weren't maintained, and started causing problems. So one thing we wanted to do was reduce that footfall, because this then became a targeted area for drug dealers. Okay, and what they were doing, we were exploiting young people to carry drugs across the estate through these paths on foot where they couldn't be chased. So the idea was then to identify and secure Brookside to make sure that in terms of moving around the estate, people still had that mobility, still had easy access, but actually hotspot areas were kind of closed off by alligating. That itself causes quite a few problems, because people who are used to going through particular ways wanted to change the way. However, what we did was change that, and we consulted with the community. So all along here, working with Wolverhampton University, working alongside Steve, we had constant consultation. However, our biggest challenge was COVID, because no sooner was a project announced, we went into lockdown. So most of the work we were doing, we were using social media platforms. We were looking at community notice boards, newsletters, you know, and obviously we work with local policing teams or frontline officers who are allowed to be in that community. So most of this work was being conducted on a screen, actually. But however, we were very clear and targeted about how we're going to do that. So as a comment from the inspector says, this wasn't achieved by officers putting interventions. It was very much led by the community and the support of the community, and giving the police a strong foundation to build upon, because what it's done is put lots of confidence back in the community to work with the police, because they saw that things were being done about issues that we've been identified. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, and I'll pass back to Elaine in a second. What we did was, when we first started this piece of work at the council, and piece of around safer, strong communities, knife crime and serious violence crime were two key issues for us, especially around what I was mentioning around the Brookside area, county lines, which is drug supply coming out across counties, drug dealing going on through a phone line. We had issues around cuckooing, and cuckooing is when people approach a vulnerable person and then take over their house to sell drugs, and basically take over the house and get people coming in. And a lot of that was happening on Brookside. But what we wanted to do was understand, moving forward, how do we sustain? And I've been around Telford for many, many years now, where we've done lots of work around social regeneration. But the investment hasn't been sustainable, because what we've done is gone out and we've done to people. Okay, we think this is a great idea, we're going to put this in the area, and we find that we've invested millions of pounds and it hasn't been sustainable. I think in terms of this project, and also the work that we do on Knife Angel, the work was driven by research, by community researchers who went out and spoke to their peers and identified and explained what was going on, which then brought some brought of ownership into the work that we're doing in Telford. So I'll pass you back into Elaine in a moment, but in terms of the project, from my point of view, it has been completed. And in terms of the evidence base, and that we've got the information back, in the 7 categories I've described to you, the impact was 160% improvement. And that is actually recorded data. Calls to the police went down by 25% on their time. In terms of acquisitive crime, that went down by 50%. You would have seen that. In terms of crime to individuals, went down. And all these are recorded data, which I have hold of. So it's very, very impressive in terms of the outcome of this project. It's a 12-month program of £550,000 investment, but the success of the program is still there to be seen. Elaine, I'm going to pass it back to you now. Yeah. And I'll pick up any questions at the end.
And it's Mahua up next, I believe.
Yeah. Thanks, Jess, for explaining so nicely what Safer Street project is. And yes, we were invited because of the success of Knife Angel project, which Elaine laid, and I've supported her, and we both were involved in this a Safer Street project. So we adopted same peer research approach, which was effective for the knife angel. And we adopted that same peer research approach for this Safer Street project as well. I'm having trouble in just moving the slides, so bear with me.
And Mahua,
Yeah.
just in case you haven't seen, Steve has joined the call.
Yeah, I've noticed, yeah. So as a peer research, as you, many of you know what peer research kind of project is and what peer research is, but just to make it a little clear, and I would say, I would explain it for anyone who doesn't know what peer research is. Peer researchers are essentially, they don't have always research knowledge, but the peer researchers are usually comes from the same people with whom we research with and who are the participants, so that they have more insider knowledge, they have more knowledge on the subject. And that's why we wanted Safer Street volunteers who were already part of the Safer Street project and who had, enough knowledge on the Safer Street project, more than us. And that's why we thought that Safer Street volunteers would be best as peer researchers. And with the help of Steve, and Steve played a very important role in this project, and he will talk about experience from peer researchers' perspective. And with the help of Steve, we recruited 6 volunteers at the very beginning, and we did some training, and I will go through the process in a minute. And you can see that we are on the heading, it's not said peer researchers, it is community researchers, because that's what they wanted. Safer Street volunteers who were acting as peer researchers, they wanted the name term community researchers rather than peer researchers. And that's why we adopted this term as community researchers. And we will actually mention as community researchers, not as peer researchers, to all those volunteers. So the research process we followed very briefly. We applied for ethics approval, and we got the ethics approval before starting the actual project. And then we did a community researcher training. Because I've said before that they don't have always research knowledge, and that's why this training is very important in any community research or peer research project. And this training involved a little bit of research knowledge, like how to collect data, how to write down those answers in a questionnaire. And then also what is ethics and why ethics is important, and what type of questions we should ask or we shouldn't ask, those kind of issues we discussed in the training. And also this training was, part of finalizing the survey questions. So community researchers were they were actually proactive in finalizing the research survey questions. And because they had knowledge, so they simplified the questions. We had a draft question, but it was finalized during the training. And that I think that day also they decided the time, date, and venue for those survey. And later they actually did 3-day survey and collected data, and I think interviewed 37 people in total. Again, findings in a nutshell, what they have found from the interviews. Most of the participants, they were living in the area, and again, majority knew what Safer Street project is about because they interviewed local people. But because this survey was all about finding the effectiveness from people's perception, so the findings suggest that effectiveness was mixed. Some things that it was really did change all the crimes and antisocial behaviors, and some thought no, there's more things needs to be done in Brookside. And then the reduction of crime and improvement safety are the two main themes they wanted to focus. And everyone agreed that currently after the Safer Street project, lighting is better, fencing, CCTV cameras are all actually improved the crime, their safety kind of feeling in Brookside while they're living in the same area. And as I said before, majority of the participants said there are some improvements, but 32% were not happy with the outcome. And that's exactly what the survey wanted to find out, what the participants think, how the safety and antisocial behaviors is after the Safer Street project. And drugs on the street and lack of facilities for teenagers, lack of police presence, and are some of the reasons highlighted by the participants and why they think they are not happy, even though, as I just said, the data actually shows it's a really effective project for the local area. And the reasons for crime and antisocial behavior identified by the participants are drugs, unemployment, deprivation, and lack of facilities. And majority of the participants believed that crime and antisocial behaviors are linked with vulnerable young people because of the school exclusion, because of their lack of skills and lack of employment opportunities. I think which Jazz and his team and Telford and Wrekin Council will have a look after we publish this report. And but half of the respondents were very happy how the Safer Street project was delivered. And the most important thing is they said they will be, they would like to be part of similar project if anything happens in the future. And they also offered some recommendations, and we will publish the report very soon. And certainly if you are interested, please get in touch with us and we will send you the report. So that's the findings in nutshell. So I will, over to you, Steve. I know you have joined and hope you can unmute yourself. And this is, we can hear from Steve about, the experience of community researchers. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if you can see me or not. Sorry, I'm doing off a handheld device, not how I would like to, but that's how it goes. Right, the introduction to Brookside volunteers and community. The volunteers who actually took part in the community research were based mainly around users of the community centre, and also user groups. So we got actually 5 representatives of that area, and then we had one actually living outside of the Brookside area, who's actually linked to the local parish council. That's the Sturchley and Brookside Parish Council. Right, I'm just going to quickly name the researchers. I think it's only fair that their names come into this. The first one was Tony Little. He's a volunteer for the Brookside Craft Group and also ex-chair of the Brookside Big Local. And there's Michaela Lewis and her daughter Kim Brown, who also got involved. And these are people very involved with the community centre. And then there's Anna McCabe, who's also an ex-volunteer of the community centre. And that one person from the Sturchley Parish Council was Adrian Watkins, who's a local councillor of Sturchley. Right. Okay, so what actually happened, there's, as Michaela already says, there was a pre-session where they designed a hard copy of the questionnaire. This was very effective with the volunteers, especially Tony and Adrian, who got very involved in this process and came up, I thought, with some excellent questions or thoughts around questions and making the answers, the questions more simple. and they also targeted the areas they actually targeted as a user group. They identified very quickly, and these were looking at a kind of cross-representation of people who use the Brookside Community Centre, because the community centre is pretty much made up of a lot of representation across the Brookside area, especially the priority area, as identified by Safer Streets Brookside. So the groups they looked at were young parents, grandparents, children who attend the preschool, older members who attend the bingo and arts groups, and young people who actually use the centre as the youth club side, and also the food share scheme. They chose the food share scheme as a natural group of people who they could easily target and consult with, and also would be those more harder to reach people on the whole, most in need. They also targeted people who were involved in the Safer Streets consultation focus groups, and also local residents, especially of the flats and bungalows, because these again are probably the ones who are less likely to be able to get out and take part in any consultation normally. As you said, they had a really good response, and through that response, they really sort of developed how they will go forward. And some of the information which you supplied so far will also help the community centre in how it will go forward as well in the future. Anyway, round the volunteers got involved, what they got out of the project. As mentioned, many got improved informed skills around consultation and how to do consultation. And people I noticed a lot develop were people like Michaela, who actually started going from being a very kind of nervous person into a person who was willing to go out there and do questionnaires and consult people. So that growth was absolutely amazing to see in one of the volunteers. And that started around the food share bit, where Tony, who has his disabilities, couldn't actually go to talk to people. So he sat on a table outside the community centre. Michaela would go over to the people in the food share queue and say, once you've picked up your items, would you mind going over to Tony and doing these questionnaires? So she went from that point to actually then visiting people in the local area, to doing questionnaires on a door-to-door basis as well, around where she lived. So as I said, she grew in confidence, and so many of these volunteers grew in confidence, which was really lovely to see. And I think they'll be holding these skills and making use of these skills in the future. So thank you very much for the opportunity for them to take part. Sorry, that's me over.
Elaine, would you like to
Yeah,
conclude?
sorry, I was surprised how quickly we got through them there. Yes, so I guess we just wanted to make some concluding comments really about this all, and then obviously we'll have a discussion. But the Safer Streets collaboration really was a collaboration between the community, the council, the police and the university. And I think all of those of us involved considered it a really positive development. And it was unusual because the community researchers, the peer researchers we were working with, were adults, and they and different from many of the people that we had trained before. So that was very interesting. The community researchers were able to engage with their community. As Steve says, they knew the places to go and the people who they thought they would want to speak to and who they could approach. And I know the example you've given of the person and the skills development, actually said she hadn't spoken to other people and been outside much for many years. So this really did make an impact as well for people in terms of their own community. It also enabled us to gain really valuable insight, which then actually has informed Safer Streets 4 project, which we're now working on with Jazz in particular, Mahua and I and another colleague. So I think we're really learning all of the time. It's not just that this is something that people within the community are able to learn from, but it's actually something we are very much able to learn from and build on, both us within the university, but also us as a team, I think, in these Safer Streets projects in terms of what works, what doesn't work, what we might do differently next time, but also how much we can gain from these projects. And that's it, Mahura, I believe.
Thanks, Elaine. Any question? I actually haven't looked at the chat yet. Okay, so there is no question.
Well, can I just make a comment? I think in terms of ongoing investment, so we have the council haven't walked away from Brookside, we're still there. What we've done is we've taken the learning from Safer Streets 1, which is Brookside. We've been very, very successful with other applications for Sutton Hill and also College Ward, as Elaine has said. However, from a council perspective, this work's important. So those underlying issues around lack of employment, skills for young people, work opportunities. We've continued with a program called Safer Stronger. And that basically is building on the coordination of activity and partnership working on Brookside, working very, very closely with the Brookside Community Centre and looking at how we support that community centre to put on activities for local people, looking at what the schools and education attainment levels are like, and then working with partners to bring in additional resources. So we're doing a lot around young people in that area who are not involved in education, employment or training, and looking at how we engage those into work or training. We've got, I think, 5 people off Brookside who have gone into employment as a result of the work that we're doing. And what we're doing is we're using data and intelligence right across the board to develop a framework on 6 priorities. Health inequalities, education skills, needs, housing is a key one, and the other 2 is around antisocial behaviour and crime. And what we're doing is we're benchmarking that and making sure that we are responding to hotspot areas to sustain the work we're going. And what the other thing is, and I think I made a bit of a joke about this the other day, was we've done a lot of landscaping work to clear and open spaces. But as with shrubbery, it grows back. So it's making sure in terms of environmental improvements, we ensure that those areas are maintained to the level they should be, or the levels we've set. So still lots of activity going on, and that will continue for another 2-3 years in terms of the investment that we're doing on Brookside and 12 other wards. So I just want to put that in. So we haven't just walked away.
Thank you. Sorry, I missed who raised the hand first, either Sandra or Christina. Oh, Sandra, yeah. So yeah, what's your question?
Okay, I've got a couple of questions, if that's okay. I think the first one, you might have explained it already, I might have missed it. I just wanted to know how you actually access the volunteers. Were they, you know, was it a part of your plan in terms of your proposal and your plan for research to have volunteers participating?
Elaine, would you like me to answer this? Yeah. So as I said at the very beginning, Sandra, that this is a peer research project. We needed volunteers to act as peer research, to act as researchers. And especially we wanted Safer Street volunteers to act as peer researchers. And Steve actually played an important role in finding those volunteers. So we had a kind of advertisement that this is the project, and he shared in local area, promoted this, and then 6 expressed their interest. It's almost expression of interest after understanding what this is about and what time they need to be involved. And then they got in touch with us and sort of assigned a consent form. And then, yeah, they were involved in this project. Okay,
no, thank you. My second question. Okay, so did your research highlight any sort of gaps or any sort of new information that you didn't actually expect to find?
To be honest, we didn't expect it to find anything. It's all about what researchers will find, because we didn't go in the field. Yes, I was there to support them, but it was all about what the community think about what are the effectiveness. So there was nothing we wanted to find. There was no hypothesis at all. What we wanted to find whether the community get involved with the peer researchers, with the community researchers, and whether they answers, because if you think of the questions, it's about crime and safety and safety of the local area, whether they get engaged with the community researchers in answering those questions. So that's something we wanted to find. Elaine, would you like to, I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, yeah, for us, the thing that we found that we hadn't necessarily expected was more to do with engaging community researchers who are adults, because we'd mainly worked with young people, lots of different types of young people, but young people, and we'd also worked with children. With adults, we encountered things like higher levels of anxiety, I would say, higher levels of issues related to literacy, and probably much less confidence initially, and people having their own and very different ways of managing that, also supporting one another very much around that. I think as Steve described, two of the people gained confidence from one another, which was quite interesting and worked really well. So for us, that was a really interesting part, but it wasn't focused on the results itself. There are things that we would do additionally, and we would always include now as well, which is the use of advertising the findings within the community and getting comments, because the community researchers really like that, and you get very good feedback. And we hadn't included that in the initial stage of this, whereas we'd done it in Knife Angel. So I think there's learning for us, but I don't know if there were findings we didn't expect.
Okay, no, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Thanks, Sandra. Christina.
Thanks very much. I have to say that I'm going to ask this question, and after the answer, I need to go because I have a meeting, so I won't be able to stay till the end. So I find really interesting the fact that you use the community to, because many interventions, we organize interventions, and then we might gather data of how effective was intervention, but we never ask the community, well, actually, how do you perceive that intervention and to what extent it was effective? So I think it's absolutely brilliant and essential that more on this research is being done, and it is great that you guys are doing all of this. My question is nothing related to all of this. It just really struck me why they didn't want to be called peer researchers and why they wanted to be called community researchers. Do you know why was the reason?
Could I answer that one?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to ask you.
No problem. I think it's a different thing where you look at young people, they naturally look towards their peer groups. We actually had quite a cross range of age, really. I mean, the youngest was 22, going through to 76. So the idea of them being seen as peer didn't quite gel with them in that sense. Also, they always see themselves as community. It's always in their name. They're community organizations. They base themselves around community. To call them peer, it just didn't make sense to them. I hope that makes sense.
Thanks, Steve. Did that answer your question, Christina? Oh, you said, yeah, you were happy. Okay, thanks, Steve, so much. Opinderjit.
Sandra, first of all, thanks ever so much for the presentation. It was really interesting. But Sandra beat me to the question that I had too, is how did you recruit the participants? So you made a point earlier on that it was individuals who were engaged with the community centres already. Is that how you then kind of recruited the volunteers, or were there kind of, I know there's some issues around using the term gatekeepers in kind of, you know, contemporary dialogue, etc. But was it important for you to have individuals who also kind of had a role as gatekeepers, you know, just for that element of trust and how important was that element of trust in this particular project?
Steve, shall I start on that, and then you can come in, because I
no,
think
finish off.
yeah, no, I think from my point of view, as a project, we really want to have a cross section of people in the community engaged with this project. So even though we'd gone to COVID at the time, and it's very, very difficult to contact people, what we wanted to do was make sure that there's a voice. So we had a number of community forums that where there were certain residents, and we had some challenging residents who were not happy with what we were proposing. So how we were going to change their attitude and behaviour to the investment coming in, and basically working alongside with them, consulting with them, making sure that we're happy. I mean, there's a number of times we had to revisit projects or contracts because people were not happy with what was going on. And the idea was to get that trust in that community to say, look, we're coming here to make your lives better, you know, but with support from yourselves. So I think in terms of the recruitment process, there was obviously the interested parties who were going to be interested and join, and we did that from non-groups. But one of the pieces of it that Steve and others did very, very well was there's a social platform that we use for Brookside residents where we got a kick in. We got a real kick in on that platform about things that we weren't doing properly, things that we're taking account. For example, what we did, okay, we put up a fence where people used as a disabled roadway. We blocked it off. Okay, and we've soon rectified it, but once that started coming in, and what happened is, as we started to rectify things and people saw that we were listening, we managed to recruit people in. But then this particular project became a bit of a commitment, and there were many challenges that Steve actually went and looked at. So I'll pass you over to Steve on that one, but I just want to point that out, that we did reach out, and part of the engagement process was having a kick in, being told off, but then winning them people over to get them engaged in the program. So Steve.
No. I was just going to go more onto the community researchers and how they balanced across. I mean, to be honest, on the kind of gatekeeper kind of role, if anybody was a gatekeeper, it was only one really who was actually involved through a lot of this, and that was Tony. The rest were actually, well, people just showed an interest in taking part in the research itself. So I basically put out a general call and targeted some of the focus groups and people we'd actually already come across. As Jazz said, the more difficult ones in the community, in the sense of they had a voice, they wanted to have their say, and they felt it important to do that. So it's always good to actually have them involved in this project. And then we tried to get as best representation across all the groups and ages. The only place I would say we failed was in the young person side of it. I did try to get the youth involved in it, but they didn't really want to get involved, and then we would have had to have support for that young person as well in the process.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Okay.
And it actually was quite a long, just to say, it was quite a long part of the process, Steve, wasn't it? Really, you actually, it took quite a lot of going back to people and talking to people, and Steve did quite a lot of that. And then we actually came, didn't we? And I think Mahua came first and talked about what it was about. And then I also joined a meeting because we were still coming in and out of the COVID things and travel. I think I joined it partly remotely or and stuff. So it was quite a big part of the process, actually, that process of engagement. Yeah.
And the great thing is, when you're working with community, you have so many unknown factors. It was so nice the group really gelled, because you don't know how these things are going to turn out, do you?
Yeah, we actually evaluated their experience later on after finishing the survey. And then all the community researchers, they actually were quite vocal about their experiences, and we learned a lot from that evaluation, which we will implement in our next peer research kind of project, that's for sure. So as Elaine said before, there was a lot of learning for us as researchers. Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone. If there is no other, okay, so there is no question on chat. So yeah, thank you everyone for, first of all, Elaine, Jazz and Steve for your all the presentations and all the informations, and everyone else for your questions and also attending the this seminar. Otherwise we won't be able to run this. So thank you, everyone. I hope to see you in October talking at seminar as well. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks,
Thank you
Chad.
so much. Bye.
Thank you.